Your brand may be staying on top of current trends, but are you agile enough to stay relevant, resilient, and successful as customers, competition, and the world continues to change at a breakneck pace? I'm thrilled to share the newly revised version of my first book, The Agile Brand. I'm calling it The Agile Brand Revisited. It's been updated to reflect our continually changing world, and it provides 7 principles that form the backbone of an agile brand, offering detailed insights and actionable steps for incorporating them into your business strategy. This is the book that started it all, and I'm excited to share it with you. It's now available in print and digital formats and available everywhere. Learn more by going to the Agile Brand Guide website at www.agilebrandguide.com. Welcome to Season 5 of The Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom, where we talk with enterprise and technology platform leaders about the people, processes, and platforms that make marketing and customer experience successful, scalable, and sustainable. This is what creates an agile brand. I'm your host, Greg Kihlstrom, advisor and consultant for Fortune 1000 marketing and CX leaders and teams as principal and chief strategist at GK5A, and best-selling author, keynote speaker, entrepreneur, and agile certified coach. The Agile Brand podcast is brought to you by TEKsystems, an industry leader in full-stack technology services, talent services, and real-world application. For more information, go to teksystems.com. To sign up for the Agile Brand newsletter and get the latest insights and articles on marketing technology and CX, or to purchase a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, go to gregkihlstrom.com. You can also find all my books on Amazon and other retailers. And now on to the show. There's a lot of talk about how important customer experience is in today's competitive landscape, but getting leaders, employees, and stakeholders all aligned to make it happen is still not a simple task. Today, we're going to talk about what it takes to create great customer experience. And to help me discuss this topic, I'd like to welcome Jon Picoult, founder of Watermark Consulting and author of the book From Impressed to Obsessed, 12 Principles for Turning Customers and Employees into Lifelong Fans. Jon, welcome to the show.
Hey, Greg, good to be here with you.
Yeah, looking forward to talking about this topic with you. Why don't we start by you giving a little background on yourself and what you're currently doing?
Sure. So as you said, I'm the founder and principal of Watermark Consulting, which is a customer experience advisory firm that essentially helps companies to impress their customers and inspire their employees. Before I launched Watermark in 2009, I spent about 15 years in senior executive roles at Fortune 100 companies at various points leading sales divisions, marketing, service, distribution, even IT. And it was actually that experience that got me thinking that it would be useful to have that background in a customer experience consultancy, because as I'm sure you've seen in your experience, where many companies go wrong is they don't realize that all of those functional silos are working at cross purposes and not really aligned around the customer experience. So having walked in the shoes of all of those functional leaders, I thought equipped me with a unique perspective to bring to the market. And in terms of what I'm doing these days, other than speaking with you right now, half my time is spent on speaking engagements and half on hands-on consulting.
Great. Yeah, definitely. I think that hands-on experience definitely helps inform the work and certainly your writing and everything like that. So let's actually start by talking about your book. So the opening line of your new book, From Impressed to Obsessed, says this: if you're aspiring to satisfy your customers, then you are aspiring to mediocrity. It seems to contradict a fundamental business tenet with which we're all familiar, namely that customer satisfaction is key. So why should we all rethink that?
You should rethink that because customer satisfaction is a one-way ticket to the business graveyard, truthfully. Study after study has shown that satisfied customers defect all the time. They just leave. So if you're trying to derive competitive advantage from the customer experience you deliver, I would argue it's not enough to merely satisfy your customers. You need to impress them. You need to leave an indelible impression in their minds that's going to cultivate the repurchase and referral behavior that's really the lifeblood of any thriving business.
Yeah, that's a great distinction there. And so, there are a lot of customer experience books out there, and I've contributed a couple to the canon,
We're
so
both
to speak,
guilty
myself.
of adding to the volume.
Right. So what compelled you to write the book? With all that out there, what did you want to say specifically with this book?
Yeah. So the trigger for me of writing the book, it's actually related just to why I even got into this business of customer experience in the first place. And it was really just around sort of a long-standing discomfort with how businesses treat both customers and employees. I find businesses subject customers and employees to all sorts of incivilities. Poor experiences abound. Be it long waits, unhelpful staff, hidden fees in the employee arena, haphazard onboarding, mercurial bosses, bureaucratic processes, archaic systems. I mean, all of these things that just make the experience awful for the people that are interacting with these firms. And what I always saw is that there were a lot of simple, straightforward, often no-cost things that organizations could do to fundamentally improve the quality of the experience that they deliver to people, their stakeholders, customers, employees, distributors, or others. And that was really the trigger for me to write the book, because I wanted to get those ideas on the page. But the other thing I would say that motivated me to write the book, and what I would say I would hope separates it from others in its genre, is I was hoping to help organizations avoid the paralysis that they often experience when trying to evaluate their brand experiences relative to a myriad of personas. When companies sit down and try to figure out how do we engineer a better experience for our customers or employees, there's a lot of time that's spent thinking about the types of constituencies they serve: individual consumers, small businesses, large enterprises, distributors. And what I always saw in my study of companies that do this well is that while personas are valuable, they're actually a universal set of principles that can be used to elevate the experience for any type of customer that you serve, be it internal or external, individual or institution, employee or employment candidate. And so that was the other motivation for writing the book, was to really crystallize those principles that are just universal in their application and allow organizations to immediately take action without having to worry about, what kind of constituency are we serving here? What's the demographic? And so that was really the other thing that I would say sets the book apart.
Yeah, that's really interesting because, working, I know you do as well, working with a lot of particularly large organizations, it's, you do get into this paralysis of, let's make sure we do all our homework and hyper personalize and do all this stuff. And it does get to this point of, there are universal truths, right? I think you're saying,
right.
You're saying that it's like employees don't like to go to 20 interviews before they find out if they get a job or not. Customers don't like to wait. They like to use the platform. They like to, and so, those universal truths are things that, there's probably some small things. And I know we're going to talk about some of this in a minute too. There's probably some small things that can just be done that don't take committees and phased projects and all of those kinds of things. Is that kind of what you're saying as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that the wheels of progress just kind of grind to a halt in many organizations because they just become so consumed with, as you say, making sure that they've got sort of all their ducks in a row, and they're doing a whole bunch of research and whatnot, and they're trying to distinguish all the different flavors of customers that they serve and engineer experiences that are tailored to them. And I'm not saying that that's a bad idea or that it's not valuable, but there's just so much that can be achieved and so many advances that can be gained just by focusing on these fundamental principles. I would almost, I would draw the parallel to just fundamental laws of physics. These are like the laws of physics for customer and employee experience. And that's really what I sought to get out there in the book.
Yeah, that's great. So let's dive in a little deeper here and talk about customer experience and what it takes to really do it well. So, one thing I know early on, I come from a marketing background, and so maybe a little late to the game with customer experience, even though I've been doing it for several years now. But are organizations still getting confused between customer experience and customer service? And what do you think the disconnect is?
Yeah, I think they are getting confused by it. I think that many organizations use those terms, interchangeably, which I think is really a problem and indicates that their orientation isn't really in the right place. People confuse the terms customer experience, customer service, user experience, and they've even melded the terms. So now people talk about customer service experience. What I would tell your listeners, the important thing to understand about the distinction between customer experience and customer service is that customer service is really but one component of the end-to-end customer experience. And the reason it's so important for organizations to appreciate that is because when people talk about customer service, their head goes to a certain place. They think about a live interaction with a live rep over the phone or over chat, or maybe at point of sale in a retail store. Maybe they'd consider that customer service. But there are a whole host of interactions that don't fall into that bucket. If I'm buying something online, does that fit into the customer service bucket? If I'm reading an account statement that I got in the mail, does that qualify as customer service? I would argue no, that most business people wouldn't characterize it that way. Yet those are interactions that are important parts of the experience for a customer. And so the idea of thinking broadly about all of the live, print, and digital interaction points that your sales prospects or your customers could possibly stumble across as they work with your business, that's really the broader purview that you need to keep in mind when you're trying to engineer a great end-to-end experience. The other thing I would also add that makes the distinction important is that the mere need for customer service in many industries implies that there is a problem with the broader customer experience.
Right.
Because if I have to reach out to a business that I've patronized and I've got a question, it's quite likely that that question would be made unnecessary if the organization had done something different upstream earlier in the experience before I even got to the customer service touch point. Maybe it was poor expectation setting at the point of sale. Maybe it was incomprehensible product assembly instructions. Maybe it was a billing statement that made no sense. You miss all of these opportunities to make the need for customer service go away if you don't think broadly about the end-to-end experience. And so that's why I think it's really important to make that distinction.
Before we continue, let's take a quick break. If you're like many marketing leaders today, you're inundated with a need to improve the customer experience across an increasing number of channels and touch points, all while ensuring your team is performing well, innovating, and continuously improving. So how do you find the time to determine what's next for you, your team, your brand, and your customers? My company, GK5A, can help. Whether it is advisory services, evaluation of marketing technology platforms and solutions, or digital agencies and implementation partners, or assistance with creating strategic roadmaps and prioritization of efforts, we've done it all and served as an ally to Fortune 1000 brands in industries like financial services, healthcare, consumer electronics, professional services, and more. You can learn more about these services and contact us at www.gk5a. That's www.gk5a.com. Now let's get back to the show.
And so, I think at this point in time, here we are mid 2023, I think most executives are bought into the premise that good customer experience is good, right? So they've read the stats. They've, certainly, I don't think there's a lot of questions about it, but, why is it still so hard to build a business case for making investments here? What's standing in the way of doing that?
What I would say is, have they really all bought into the idea that a good customer experience is better for business? I think that in many circles, people, they say the right things and they talk the talk, but do they walk the talk? Perhaps not. And the reason I say that is because I think that there has long been a deep-seated skepticism in the executive suite and among boards of directors about the ROI of customer experience. I think that, what they don't say publicly is that there's a concern that the returns are soft, are fluffy, because they wonder, how do I really know that my investments in a better customer experience are paying off? Are you going to tell me it's because I'm going to have higher revenues? Well, that could be triggered by lots of other things, lots of other variables, a new marketing campaign, an expanded sales force, lower pricing. So I think that when executives sort of say that they believe that customer experience is important, what is left unsaid is that they just harbor this skepticism of, well, how do you actually ever prove it? Because there are so many other things that could be driving the benefits that you, the customer experience professional, are purporting to come as a consequence of a better experience. And so that's why I think it's hard to build a business case for it, is because these are executives or people that they speak in the language of numbers, and they like to quantify things, and they feel as though it is difficult to quantify the ROI of customer experience. And I would dispute that, but I think that's what many of them feel.
Yeah. So then, follow up to that is, how would you convince the skeptics that there's tangible ROI in CX and CX improvements?
Right. Yeah. So, I'll go back to when I launched my firm back in 2009. And even before I launched my own consultancy, when I was working in the corporate world, this was something that always bothered me. I would see that executives and boards of directors would routinely take the leap of faith on initiatives that were arguably had an uncertain outcome, an uncertain ROI, whether it's a big merger and acquisition, whether it's the hiring of a multi-million-dollar celebrity CEO. But they did it because somewhere in their heart they believed, we were going to get the return. And when I launched my firm in 2009, I had to figure out, how do you get people to see that these returns are not soft and fluffy? How do you get them to take the leap of faith, as they are with some of those other types of initiatives? And what dawned on me is that you got to speak to people in the language that they understand. And these executives and the boards of directors, what they really understand is the language of shareholder value. Whether you're a public or a private entity, you're really all about growing business value for your investors. And so the idea dawned on me. I remember very vividly. It was Christmas time in 2009. And I said to myself, I wonder if you look at the companies that excel in customer experience and compare their shareholder returns to those that lag in customer experience, what would that analysis look like? And that was the genesis of what is called the Watermark Consulting Customer Experience ROI Study. It's a study that we update every few years. And it was actually the first study that showed a connection between the quality of a company's customer experience and the shareholder returns. And the latest iteration of the study has 13 years of data in it. And it shows that the companies that lead in customer experience outperform those that lag by an over 3-to-1 ratio. And to me, that's the exclamation point on the case for customer experience at a macroeconomic level. And when you share that with executives, I think that it opens their eyes a bit. And I'm not saying they'll write a blank check for you, but I think it starts to get them to see that these returns from customer experience are not soft and intangible. They're actually very hard, and they are quantifiable. And then if you want to look specifically within your business, what I would tell you is, you wonder, well, where does the increase in revenue come? Is it from the new marketing campaign or the expanded sales force? Well, you know what? Start tracking where you're getting your business from. And when you start to see how much of your business is coming from referrals from existing customers, that's an indication of how your customer experience is driving revenue. In addition, you could look at the expense side of the equation, and you could quantify things like, how many calls do you get per order? Or what is the difference in the lifetime value between the customers that love you versus those that despise you, the promoters versus the detractors? These are all proven ways to quantify at a company level the return that you are getting on delivering that great customer experience. And these are things that takes a little time to do those calculations and to compile that data. But you can absolutely put your finger on what is the value of customer experience, not just to the business arena as a whole, but to your company specifically.
Yeah, that's great, and great that you've put that data together in a report and have the that many years of data as well. That's great stuff. One of the things that's top of mind to me and that I do a lot of work on is multi-channel or omni-channel CX and marketing and things related. And this is certainly a challenge for a lot of organizations. I've seen statistics where, 15, 20 years ago, a consumer might use maybe 2 or 3 channels during the buying process alone. Now they're using 5 or 6, if not more. And that's only just during the buying process, not through the entire customer journey. Can you talk about some of the challenges that many organizations are facing here? And, how do you recommend that an enterprise find ways to get a good omni-channel customer experience, whatever good might mean? It may mean different things for different orgs, or is omni-channel even the right goal? What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, so the notion of omni-channel, that actually hits on a number of the 12 principles that I cover in the book. Things like you want to make it effortless for your customers, and you want to personalize the experience. If there are multiple avenues through which they can engage with your business, you want to make sure that it's easy for them to skate between those avenues. You want to make sure that when they move from one avenue to another, that information is carried with them so that the experience continues to feel personalized and that things aren't forgotten and they don't need to repeat themselves, investing more effort in telling their story over and over again. I think that often the biggest impediment in organizations is simply the technology that allows them to capture that information and to share it with the right people and the right systems within the organization to create that kind of seamless omni-channel experience. And there's obviously a lot more to do in that regard. And companies, they have a lot of trouble with this. We've all had that experience where you provide your account number, whether it's, online or over the phone. And then, eventually you get routed to a live rep. And what's the first thing that they ask you? Right. What's your account number? It is absolutely infuriating. And we've been at this for years, decades, right? And, companies still haven't gotten it right. And it's unfortunate. And you have to pay attention to it. And you have to make sure that the data is being collected in a way so that it can be easily shared across other platforms. But going back to your question, which I think is a really critical one, should the goal be omni-channel? I don't think the goal should be omni-channel. I think the goal should be right channel. And here's what I mean by that. You want to give the customer choice in the avenues that they have to engage with you. However, it's advisable to nudge them towards the avenue that is probably best suited for their situation. Okay. So what I mean by that is you can gather some information from the customer to understand what is the assistance that they require. And if it's a simple issue, then you might might nudge them towards a chatbot or a live chat with a representative. But if it's a complex issue, you might point them towards telephone support. And the reason I think that is valuable, that approach, is because you don't want a customer that has a complex issue, for example, to decide to use a chatbot and then get disappointed and then have to invest more effort in switching channels and retelling their story and whatnot. So I find that companies that actually gather some initial triage information, give the customer a choice of avenues, but suggest to them the one that we think is best for you based on what you've told us, I think that's a better experience.
Yeah. No, I love that. So you touched on this a little bit at the very beginning of the show. I wanted to get back to customer and employee experience and kind of that relationship. How do you look at it? How do you describe that relationship?
So I would put the relationship between customer and employee experience is really this. Happy, engaged employees help create happy, loyal customers who in turn help create more happy, engaged employees. It is a virtuous cycle that feeds on itself. And once you get that flywheel spinning, you can pretty much roll over your competitors and write your own ticket. And so the two are inextricably linked. They are two sides of the same coin. You can't, over the long term, expect to have a great differentiated customer experience if you don't have employees who are equipped and inspired to deliver that experience. But the other thing I would also point out is that there are many parallels between what it takes to create a great customer experience and what it takes to create a great employee experience. Indeed, if you think about it, what it takes to foster engagement between a customer and a company is not all that different than what it takes to foster engagement between an employee and a leader. Things like, are you responsive to me? Do you communicate clearly and transparently with me? Are you genuinely advocating for my interests? Do you make it effortless for me to accomplish what I'm trying to accomplish? Do I feel better after I've interacted with you as compared to before? And because there are so many parallels, the fact of the matter is the very same principles, those laws of physics we talked about earlier, that you can apply to create a great customer experience can also be employed to create a great employee experience. And so that's the other connection I would say between the two, is the idea that the very same muscles that you flex to engage and build loyalty with customers can also be used to engage and build loyalty with employees.
Yeah. And so what should leader, there's a lot of leaders listening to this as well as aspiring leaders. What should they do to get this, either get it started, kind of accelerated or just, start moving ahead in this direction? I completely agree with what you're saying here.
Yeah, I think a great first step to get that flywheel spinning is to simply enlist your employees in the customer experience improvement effort, particularly your frontline staff, who are arguably most knowledgeable about what your customers like and dislike. Engage those employees in a dialogue, solicit their ideas for improvement. How can we make it better for our customers? How can we remove obstacles that you face when you're trying to serve a customer? And then, of course, start acting on what you learn and the ideas you compile. The reason I point to that is because with that single act, that is actually going to simultaneously enhance both the customer experience and the employee experience. Because employees are going to feel like more of a strategic partner in the business, not just a cog in the wheel. And so that's going to move the needle on employee experience, giving them a greater sense of purpose. But then by capitalizing on the ideas that they share with you, you're also going to be moving the needle on customer experience quality. So with that one act of enlisting frontline employees in the improvement exercise, you can actually elevate the experience of both of those two key constituencies that are instrumental in the success of your business.
Yeah, definitely. Well, Jon, thanks so much for joining the show. I've got one last question before we wrap up here. So as a fellow author, I always like to ask a little bit about the process of writing. So, in writing your most recent book, From Impressed to Obsessed, what did you learn through the writing process, and, what might you do differently in writing a follow-up?
I think what was surprising to me is I learned how much I didn't know. When I sought to write this book about my 12 principles, I know the 12 principles like the back of my hand, but what was really eye-opening and energizing to me is as I did more and more research, I just came up with all kinds of examples in the marketplace that I was seeing of how these principles were really being applied by organizations, even though they might not have realized it. And so while I thought that I was, an expert and knew all these examples, that was really enlightening and eye-opening for me. And in terms of what I would do differently, it would be figuring out how to carve out time to write a book even when there is not a global pandemic-induced lockdown. Because I had this book banging around inside my head for literally a decade, but just had difficulty carving out the time to write it along with running my business. And it was just when COVID lockdowns came that, then I found the time 9 months straight to just focus on writing it. So if I write another book, that'll be the challenge, is how to do it without another pandemic being required to give me the time to actually write it.
Yeah. Well, yeah. And definitely, one of the things I love about writing, which you touched on, is I learned so much. As much as you think, it's right. Doing that extra level of research, or even more recent research or stuff like that. That's one of the reasons I love writing so much. So
yeah, agreed.
Again, I'd like to thank Jon Picoult, founder of Watermark Consulting and author of the book From Impressed to Obsessed, 12 Principles for Turning Customers and Employees into Lifelong Fans, for joining the show. You can learn more about Jon and Watermark Consulting by following the links in the show notes.
Thanks again for listening to the Agile Brand with Greg Kihlstrom podcast, brought to you by Tech Systems. If you enjoyed the show, please take a minute to subscribe on your podcast channel of choice and leave us a rating so that others can find the show more easily. You can access more episodes of the show at www.gregkihlstrom.com. That's GregKihlstrom.com. agilbrand.com. To get a copy of my latest book, House of the Customer, visit my website, or you can find it on Amazon or other retailers. The Agile Brand is produced by Missing Link, a Latina-owned, strategy-driven, creatively fueled production co-op. From ideation to creation, they craft human connections through intelligent, engaging, and informative content. Until next time, stay agile.